What's up, fam? Agent O here with another movie review. And unfortunately, today I'm going to be reviewing a movie that is some bullshit, some straight bullshit. That movie being X Men Days of Future Past. Now, I know a lot of people have already reviewed this movie and they're saying it's so great. It's the best X Men movie we've seen, ever. And it's non stop action packed from start to finish. It's a ride and blah, blah, blah. And I've just come to realize that I'm one of those people that has a idea of how these movies should be, and this just is how at the X-Men should be in the movie and in these movies, and this just is not it for me. I know if you go on the Strident's page and you check out the Off Our Brains episode 5 where we talk about the Amazing Spider-Man, ODC That's Me mentions how there was a guy who said that the ending in Amazing Spider-Man 2 doesn't work, and here's how, and it just came off as somebody who, and ODC even makes this point of pointing out how um, he kind of jokingly says how, you know, they made this movie and it's not the way I wanted it to be. Like, this is how the X-Men movies are. So I fully admit I am that, like, I'm that dude. I'm not that particular dude ODC is talking about, but I fit in that criteria when it comes to the X-Men films. This just is not what I personally would have wanted to see done with the X-Men franchise. I think that there was just a whole lot of missteps made with this film, with this entire franchise in general, that could have easily been rectified by just going over the source material a bit more closely, because had you done that you would have had an even better film than or better films than you've got with these movies that we unfortunately have and that everyone likes for some odd reason. But anyway, aside from that, I can still like watch a movie objectively and point out the pros and cons of the film, without letting my personal feelings get in the way. And so I'm gonna do that. The first part of this review is gonna be basically spoiler free, and then the second half of the video of the review is gonna be full of spoilers, because the problems I had with this film are plot, are plot focused. So I can't talk about the cons without talking about the plot. So I'll let everyone know if you haven't seen the film yet when the spoilers start, so that you can still be surprised when you go see the film. And the reason I'm doing that is because I don't want to make two different videos, one spoiler free, one full of spoilers, because I think that's just clickbait. On YouTube, people are just who do that are just trying to get views, because you can easily do that in one video. So that's what I'm doing. This is probably the format I'm going to stick with when it comes to whenever I do a movie review. So anyway, I'm going to start off with the pros, and I mean, honestly, the movie visually, it does look pretty good. It's, costume wise, I'm not thrilled with the costumes, but presentation wise and the way the movie is filmed, I mean, it's serviceable. It does what it has to do. They definitely captured the period of the 70s in this film, and bouncing between, the 70s past and the post-apocalyptic future. They did a good job with the look of that, with that part of the look of the film. Um, the beginning also, it tries to really, like, the very beginning of the film um, where they're showing the future and how bleak everything is. They try to channel that that Holocaust concentration camp feeling that you got with the very first X-Men film. But in this case, it doesn't have the same emotional impact that the first film did. But there's elements there. You see mass graves. You see people dead and being herded off to be killed and all that, mutants and stuff. So the references are there. It's just not executed as well as it was in the first film. Also, you actually get to see the X-Men fight as a team. You see the future X-Men fight as a team, which was always one of my biggest complaints with this franchise, was that the fights and the action always seemed disjointed, and they never seemed to really like pull together and take on objectives as a team. It was never team focused. It was always like Storm was over here fighting this person, um, Jean Grey's fighting this person, Wolverine's all fighting Sabretooth, and this time you actually see them come together and pool their abilities together and fight. It's it's actually that's actually what we've always wanted to see with an X-Men film. And of course, the actors, uh, Peter Dinklage, who played Trask, and James McAvoy as Xavier, Michael Fassbender, Hugh Jackman, blah blah blah. Those guys, they all came through in the acting department. Obviously, you know, Hugh Jackman loves playing this character, so and it shows in the films. He wants to keep this guy. He wants to keep this Wolverine character in movies as long as possible. He loves the character, and it shows when he in his acting performance. Peter Dinklage, he's just a good actor. Same thing with McAvoy. Those guys have a wide range when it comes to them showing emotions, and they're believable in the roles that they pick. So, I'm not going to talk too much about that because obviously these guys are good. They brought their game, they brought their A game to the movie. Can't fault them for that. Even though I don't like this movie, can't fault them for that. They did the damn thing with their acting. The action in this film was just okay. I know people aren't like and this that's not necessarily a con. It was just cool. It was okay. It wasn't blowing your socks off like a lot of other people were making it out to be, because I was expecting to see some of the reviews. They were expecting to see some really crazy stuff, and there was one scene in the film which seems to be like the the trend. I don't know if this is on purpose. I doubt it's on purpose, but it seems like every X-Men movie has one scene in the film where there was actually some really dope action. Like X-Men 2 had the beginning scene with Nightcrawler and him teleporting and attacking, and beating up people all at the same time and stuff, and that was actually awesome. And then to the point where it felt like there was like that whole beginning sequence was directed by somebody else and by you know not by Bryan Singer. Um, because the rest of the movie didn't have the same feeling that that first scene did. Same thing with the first movie. You had the Holocaust scene with you know Eric Lenshaw, aka Magneto, getting separated from his mom, and you see his powers manifest, and it was emotional. Like that wasn't action packed, but it was so emotional. And I mean, you could feel, if you didn't feel for anything, if you didn't get any feelings during that scene, then I don't know, you're just a cold-hearted individual, because you could feel it. Um, and in the third movie, I can't even really remember um, anything from the third movie or from X Men Origins. I mean, not X Men. Well, X Men Origins Wolverine was complete trash. Um, but also X Men First Class. Nothing, no action scenes really stood out to me that I can honestly think of. Maybe with with Azazel doing a bunch of teleporting and fighting and stuff. But other than that, like this movie actually has a scene in it. I'm not going to mention what it is because this is the spoiler-free part. But there is a scene, and when you see it, you'll know what scene I'm talking about, where they actually did the damn thing. But then the rest of the movie doesn't feel like that. Once again, like all the rest of the action, all the situations, don't don't come off the way that one action sequence that I'm talking to, the standout action sequence, that has that feeling. None of the other scenes in the movie have that same feeling. Even at the very end, where it's the big climactic payoff and everything, still not as good as that scene that happened way earlier in the film. As far as like the new X Men characters that they brought in, Bishop, Sunspot, Blink, um, and Colossus. I mean, they were there. It was kind of cool. Unfortunately, there wasn't enough time spent on them for you to actually really care about them, and I'll get to that later in the spoiler part as to why I say that. I didn't care, but I'll talk about that later. But actually, I'm going to talk about it right now because honestly, that's all the good shit that I felt was all the things I felt were good about this movie. There really, other than that, I really couldn't. I was struggling trying to find more good things to point out, and I just couldn't find it. It just was not there for me. So I'm just gonna jump right into the cons. And there are some cons, and this is where we get into spoiler territory. So if you have not seen the movie and you want to be surprised by what you see, stop watching this video or listening to this video right now because we're going into spoiler territory and it's not going to be pretty. So anyway, one of the very first cons, and this is something that came right when the movie basically started, within the first like 5 minutes of the film, we're seeing Kitty Pryde using powers that she's never had ever in the comics or ever established in the movies. All of a sudden, she has this power to, I guess you could call it phasing someone's consciousness back in time. Her power set is pretty specific. You can go on to Comic Vine, or you can look her up in Wikipedia, and they tell you in there that she has phasing powers, where she can phase her physical body, or if she touches you, she has physical contact with you, she can phase you too through solid objects, through people, through organic and inorganic material. Basically, she has it down to the point where she can phase through air molecules and literally walk on air, or like kind of fly, but it's more like she's walking on air. Like, that's how dope she is with the phasing powers. She can also, when she phases through electronic equipment, she can like malfunction it and make it, destroy itself or whatever. She also has a hard time phasing through some metals. Some are worse than others. Like when she phases through adamantium, it's a little hard. Or like when she phases through, like say Wolverine and his skeleton, it'll actually cause Wolverine pain by phasing through his body because he's phasing through the adamantium. And so that's like the big extent of her powers. Aside from being like really really smart and accomplished martial artist, I'm not going to get too much more into her character because obviously Bryan Singer did not either. And so they don't explain how she has these powers. They barely explain how they work. It's just an excuse it's a plot device basically, and they use it as a reason to have the character that plays Kitty, to have a bigger role in the film. Because in the original story, she does go back in time, but it wasn't through her own volition. It was through another mutant. I can't remember who it was, but I know bits and pieces of the original story. I have not actually sat down and read it all, but um, I know enough to know that she does not do this in the comics. So anyway, they never explain this to you, the viewer. So it's a stretch of my suspension of disbelief, basically. So it's one of those things where you see it and it begs some kind of explanation, and you don't ever get it. Um, and also the Sentinels, the advanced Sentinels, which are obviously based off of Mystique's powers, which I guess maybe through more, which Mystique's powers were just to mimic people, to get the look and the voice and all that stuff down. While they were able to adapt the to mutant abilities and then actually replicate their abilities and steal them, um, it's like they took the some of the plot from the cartoon series Wolverine and the X-Men, um, because there's a part in the show in the series where Wolverine actually gets captured, and I forgot which doctor it is that experiments on him and does some research and realizes that they replicate his unique healing factor, and they use it on the Sentinels. They create a whole new set of Sentinels. Um, Actually, the entire show, it feels like this movie feels a lot like that show, and I'm gonna get to that more in a little bit. But if you've ever seen that show, you can definitely see the relation between between Wolverine and the X-Men and this movie, which Wolverine and the X-Men, the plot is taken from um, X-Men Days of Future Past, but they played around a lot with it. So there's that connection there. Um, and like I said earlier, the action in the film it was okay, but it was pretty lackluster overall. And with the exception of the Quicksilver scene, the Quicksilver scene was the standout moment in the movie. Like I was actually impressed when I saw it. Honestly, it was like the best thing that was it's uh the best shot in the entire film. It Yeah, it was just really damn good. Aside from that though, like the rest of the action was just meh. Um, you see during the big climactic scene when the Sentinels are attacking in both the past and the future. You see in the future, you see basically all the remaining X-Men get pretty much murdered, and I mean really murdered. Like Colossus gets torn to pieces, and you see Storm die, and it's all dramatic and it's in slow motion, and you just don't care because these people in as a movie, these characters didn't really have that big of an impact compared to all the characters that you saw that was in the past. Like all the time was spent, you know, um, the focus was there to where you wanted to see what happened with these characters. But with the future X Men, with Storm and Blink and Bishop, who Bishop they could have easily had done more with because part of uh, his big storyline deals with the future and because he comes from the future and he goes into the past and they could have easily blended those elements into into this film, but I knew they weren't going to because Bryan Singer or the people who also wrote the script, they don't care about that character. um, you know, they wanted to focus on Wolverine, and that's why this movie should have just been called um, Wolverine and the X-Men Days of Future Past. That's what this movie should have been just called because he was the main focus, and everyone else kind of played second fiddle to him. Just like the cartoon series focused on Wolverine trying to change the events of the past so that the apocalyptic future doesn't happen. It's just basically the same thing in this film. But anyway, getting back to Quicksilver, why after you see what he's capable of, I it begs the question to me why this is kind of like a how it should end type of scenario or thought that I had. Because later on, after that big scene that you see Quicksilver in, they basically write him out of the movie. He has to like take the car back home or some shit. And I'm like, why didn't they keep this guy with them? You just saw how you didn't see, but you know how he saved all your asses from getting shot in the Pentagon cafeteria or whatever. So why not keep him? Like so many situations that happened in the film later on could have easily been just solved by utilizing Quicksilver. So like if you have that kind of an asset on your team, why not like use it? Like he could have stopped Mystique from trying to shoot Trask. He could have, or at least assisted, in his own way, stopping Magneto. Like so many things could have turned out a lot better than they did, and it didn't have to come to a head like at the very end of the film, like it had just by having Quicksilver on the team. Why they chose to get rid of him, I guess that would have made for a more simpler film, but then again, that's where it comes to some writers to actually think up of situations where they would have to keep him occupied from being that effective. I don't know, but then they'd have to actually write and make it interesting. And I guess they just want to take it easy, or have an easy job of this movie. There were other things about this plot that I just didn't understand that could have came out a lot better had some actual common sense been used. And I know this is nitpicking, this isn't actually something wrong with the film, but it's kind of like if I had been tasked to write this film with these situations, I would have went about them a bit differently. And And the one other example of that was when Xavier was using the people in the airport to talk to Mystique. And he says he can't get into her head to stop her, but he can get into her head enough to project himself to her because nobody else saw him in the airport except for Mystique. When you see him when you see him there, he was there in her head trying to talk to her. So I'm thinking, instead of trying to talk her out of it, why not talk her out of it while actually showing her the consequences of her actions so that she gets more of an idea of what's going to happen if she goes through with her plan. He saw it, so why couldn't he make her see it? That boggles my mind. Like I think that would have kept her from even trying to go to kill Trask, or the president. Instead, she would have went to try and stop Magneto because she knew Magneto was going to do his thing and try and stop him. So that I don't get why they didn't do that. It would have been one thing if they did it and she still rejected it anyway. Then I could understand, okay, and then later on she sees, but they didn't even do that. So, you know, there was that. Then there was, the Magneto double cross, which, I mean, Magneto. If you read the comics, you know how Magneto is, and as well as Xavier says they're good friends in this film. You didn't see Magneto coming. You didn't see his betrayal coming a mile away. Like you didn't prepare for it at all. Like everybody was just kind of stunned. Like, oh my God, he's going to kill Mystique just to stop, the future from happening. Like, and then he's gonna go off and do his own thing. Like you never thought for one second he was ever going to try and do something like that. I knew he was going to do something like that, and I didn't even, and I didn't, and I knew that, and I didn't know anything about the film when I saw it, but I knew it was coming because it's fucking Magneto. But it's whatever. These movies, this franchise clearly is just not made for. It's not made for. I don't think it's made for the true X Men fan or somebody who really loves a lot of the great stories that were told, in the '80s and the '90s. Um, this was just made for. This was made for the casual comic book movie going customers, and it's unfortunate because I really feel like if they had utilized the comic book source material a lot more, they would have had an even better movie on their hands. And you could have easily had an Avengers type of of execution and profit, if that's, since that's always the ultimate goal of these superhero films, just to turn over a huge profit. Now imagine if you had used the reference material, the source material, a lot more, and done a lot of the awesome, crazy comic book moments that you see in those stories, and translate that to film. Imagine how much better these movies would have been. You could have made $1 billion off of one X Men film, but you're not going to. I mean, this movie's going to make a lot of money, but it's not going to. I personally don't see it making I don't see it doing Godzilla money. Like Godzilla made $100 million in one weekend. Like I personally don't see it doing that, but who knows? I haven't checked Box Office Mojo yet or MovieMojo.com or whatever. So there's that. Instead of getting true to the X Men comic, we get a rip off of a cartoon made into a live action movie. So I don't even understand where the artist ego comes in with trying to do something within your own vision, because that's what we see with a lot of these comic book films. We always see the screenwriters and the director want to do things their way and show things how they want to see them, but all you guys did was just rip off a lackluster cartoon. I mean, the cartoon only went on for one season, and even at the end of that season of the cartoon, they show you that they were going to do Age of Apocalypse, which is what the next X Men movie is going to be. It's going to be Age of Apocalypse. So you just ripped off elements of the cartoon and made it into a movie, and that's actually really lame. So much for your artistic vision. it's just it boggles my mind how I can go onto YouTube and I can watch like Street Fighter Assassin's Fist and see just how true to the source material they stayed, and they still put together something awesome. And then I go and watch these, and they're doing that on like literally a shoestring budget. Like I was talking with Striding, and he told me that whole production took like only $2 million to do, and they got all that cool stuff off. But then I go to watch these comic book movies done by comic book movies and Transformers and GI Joe and all that, and I go and see those films, and these people are getting paid like millions of dollars to produce this stuff, and it's not even remotely what you would imagine it to be based on the stuff you read or the cartoons you watched, or the toys you used to play with or whatever. I just don't understand how I just don't understand it. I don't get it. It's unfortunate. These I guess this movie is just these X-Men movies are just not made for me, and that's too bad. I'm not even that big of a comic book like geek. I'm not a comic book geek like that. I know a lot of shit about comics, but I'm not somebody who has to be like it has to be done exactly like this, or it's garbage. I like when they take liberties and they change things and make them and they take an original idea and make it better. But this was just going off in a whole other different direction that it's not even doesn't even feel like the source material that it was gathered from. So anyway, that's gonna pretty much do it for this review. I don't care for this movie. If you go and watch it and you like it, hey, good for you. But I don't think it's a good film. I don't think it's a good representation of the X Men. They only did this film to basically retcon X Men Origins Wolverine and X Men 2 and 3. So I guess out of all of this, we got the first comic book movie retcon. So I guess in a way it is kind of like the comics. If we're already doing that now, it's not even a reboot. It's just a retcon into a reboot. So whatever, it's whatever. You know, that's gonna pretty much do it for this review. I'm Agent O, and I'm out. Peace.